And this is our dear friend, Quinn Eggink. He has been the guy that you guys have heard us talk about since like our first episode. We've been referring to this infamous Quinn figure. Well, he has descended from the clouds to help us review a very special album that is deep in the hearts of all three of us, of these gentlemen here. And Quinn is also a Packer fan. I have to thank him for getting... You guys have commented on my Packer love. Quinn gave me the Packer love. Quinn also shares Tom and my love for the album that we're going to review today, which is Arcade Fire's first album, Funeral. Now, if you don't know who the Arcade Fire is...
You suck.
Well, you do suck, and you probably don't watch the Grammys, and you've been living under a rock, and in which case probably don't have the internet either, so you're not watching this video. But the Arcade Fire, you guys voted for this album in our VIMTV voting thing that we do bi-weekly, and this beat out Mars Volta, De Last in the Comatorium, which is another huge album from the early to mid-2000s, and I think that just kind of goes to say how important this album has been, you know, and how many critics have touched this album, you know.
Oh, there's barely anything we could say that hasn't been said about this album over the past 7 years at some point.
Yeah, so...
And the beautiful thing about this is that, you know, it's one that we actually all were just saying we didn't even like it first.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet you can always go back and listen to it and have a new appreciation because it takes a long time, I found, to get into. But once you do, it's one of those life-changing albums.
Now, we kind of think that this is more of a tribute to the Arcade Fire's Funeral because I think we all love it so much that, you know, describing the sound, it's kind of the definition of what indie rock is right now.
Yeah.
A lot of guitar drivens, a lot of very emotive vocals. The lyrics on this album have been noted by reviewer after reviewer and music critics alike. We all love it. We all think that the lyrics are fantastic in general, especially in comparison to other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But so there's not a lot we can add to the sound description, so we're going to just kind of relate some personal experiences, some personal reflections that we have on the music and what the music really does for us, because I think everyone has a personal experience with this. Tom, what do you think?
Well, by this point, since I've been listening to it for so long, I mean, I find a few of these songs to be some of the most moving songs I've ever heard. And obviously that's something that's going to take you a while to get to. If you actually haven't listened to this album, you know, definitely give it a shot, but don't expect to be blown away on first listen. As I said, this thing takes time. Especially for me, it took time with some of the slower tracks.
Right.
Tracks like, okay, track 3,
Love.
that's in French. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not even going to touch it. And then also tracks 5 and 6, Crown of Love and Neighborhood Number 4, 7 Kettles, reversed obviously, I said in reverse order. But because for a while it's just kind of like, you know, these slow moving songs. But what really hooks me in is how they change in the middle of them. And they have these end sections that really pick up the pace and bring an entirely different twist to the song. And so the contrast there makes the first part of the song seem like so much more than it would have by itself. And that's something that took me a while to really grasp because I was just kind of like, this part of the song is kind of slow, kind of bores me a little bit because I'm not really feeling it. But the whole point is once you listen to it enough and you can almost anticipate those end sections coming up, and at that point, that's when you've really wrapped your head around it and can appreciate it for what it is.
Right. Quinn, what you think?
You know, this has been one of my favorite albums for a very long time. But as Jake pointed out, when I first heard it, and Jake and I were there when we both heard it for the first time, we both hated it.
Yeah, we turned it off immediately.
I felt I felt at the time it was just abrasive and strange. And I still can't really disagree with that opinion now, but it's turned more into something that I enjoy of the album rather than something that I thought was a drawback initially.
Well, clearly, because you hang out with me and I'm very abrasive.
You're abrasive, and I hated you to begin with. And now, look, I still don't really feel that strong about you, but it's better, I guess. Anyway, so... Like I said, I felt like this was kind of abrasive, and I think that ends up becoming one of its strongest points. In the end, is that it can feel a little bit, when you listen to it initially, it can feel a little bit reckless at times. Like you're not really sure where it's going, but if you listen through that, as Tom pointed out, if you listen through some of that stuff, you start to feel kind of that method behind the madness, some of that craft, some of that structure behind some of the strangeness. Lyrics, I can't go past lyrics either. I mean, lyrics are key on this album. If you want to hear the pinnacle of contemporary lyrics, if you want to hear some of the best lyrics you can find out there in indie music, this is where you turn.
And one thing for me that I wanted to point out is I actually hadn't listened to this album in quite a while before, like 2 nights ago, and I put this on so that I could be ready for tonight. And before then I had been listening to a lot more of Neon Bible and the Suburbs recently. And so going back to this, I realized that Win Butler as a vocalist really has matured over the last couple albums, but it doesn't hinder this album at all. And in fact, there is somewhat of, as you said, a method to the madness, because sometimes he sounds like a madman. It sounds like he's literally 10 feet back from the microphone, just kind of yelling at it. And so you get this kind of like empty reverb sound where there's just it sounds like so much space between him and the listener. But somehow it works. He's like calling to you through this thick fog of all the instrumentals, which is another thing that has really defined indie music these days. It's just a variety of instrumentals. Violin playing such a big key on it, and even some accordion and things.
And I can promise you a lot of bands hinge on the fact that the Arcade Fire did this and were
Right.
popular enough at doing it when they did it, that it perpetuated that idea.
I totally agree. So that's one thing in the vocal performance that you'll definitely notice. Where on their newer albums, the vocals are a lot more present. Well, these, it's not like you can't hear them, but there's something almost ghostly about them, and it adds a lot of effect.
And Tom, besides the fact that I think a lot of people, and especially, I'm interested to hear what you guys think, and maybe I'll ask this at the end of the episode, about which album you got into first by Arcade Fire. Now, to me, The Suburbs, I know I gave it 100 on this show back when we reviewed it. And to me, once you get close enough to 100, I just call it 100, because I think that in relation to other albums, that's where it gets to.
Yeah.
If I were going to pick out any one specific gripe about The Suburbs, it would be the fact that I felt like while Win's vocals and maybe his presentation was good, he didn't emote nearly as much as he did on previous albums, especially this one. To me, that's what sells this album. That's what makes it so vibrant, so emotive. It's just how he just is screaming at you, how his tension just bubbles over, and the fact that he just goes whoop in the middle of the song sometimes. The little things like that, little idiosyncrasies of his vocal parts are what gives the song their energy, especially in when you look at track 5, Neighborhood Number 4, or I just call Kettles. That song is so quiet. You have this low, very soft acoustic guitar part, and then just Win singing, and then his voice controls the dynamics. It controls the intensity of the song, and that's something that only really talented vocalists can really pull off. And that was really the first thing that sold me on Arcade Fire as a band, and that's something that I will always take with me. And even I'm looking forward to see if that comes back on future albums, because Arcade Fire, they were trying to do something different with The Suburbs. They were trying to do something that harkened back to the sound of when they were developing all their musical talents, and so maybe that had played a role in it. I wouldn't imagine. I don't think this band does anything unconsciously. I think everything about their writing process is extremely plain. This album was slaved over. You can tell every detail, every single sound, every note you hear was planned and perfectly positioned for a straight through listen, and that's something that I really respect. And lyrics, how many bands there's, the 2 bands that you voted on are both bands that play with 2 different languages within the lyrics and have lyrics that reference the different parts and even get into some character development there. And I think that that's something that adds a lot to a listener's experience. It gives you another medium of which you can relate to the music. It gives you another avenue to get into it. And that's something that in this day and age, with all the music that's been released over the past, how many decades, and the saturation of the music industry, that's something that artists have to do nowadays to get you involved, to get you to realize that, hey, this music is legit. This is something worth you listening this year. And that's something that I think that this album really accomplishes, as we have noted now. It is completely decided what has been indie music for the past 7 years.
Yeah, and sort of, just to make another sort of side comment, to Jake's point about it being a really emotional album and emoting in the right ways, this was an album that was very personal to the band because it dealt with a lot of family issues that they were having. It was called Funeral because of so many deaths that happened in their family. And so it takes on a very personal feel, and you can feel every ounce of that emotion that they're draining from themselves onto their record.
Right. And that's what makes a great album.
That's what makes it so awesome, that it was personal to them, but they make it relatable enough to the listener that you can you can do something with
Right.
it.
So, a question for you guys: one, what was the Arcade Fire album that you got into first? What brought you to the band? And two, on Funeral, what's your favorite Arcade Fire lyric on Funeral? That's something that I think everyone has their own favorite lyric. And then if you guys talk to us, we'll reveal those in the comments of this video. So please leave us a comment at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Also follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. That's where we do a lot of chatting about our musical conversations that we so badly like to get out of our system every day. So please visit us there. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And this is Quinn. He's been joining us for Arcade Fire's Funeral. Thanks guys for watching. We are moving music critique forward.